Hi, I'm Justin.
And I'm Michael.
And this is our podcast where we discuss what we find interesting about the intersection of Web3 and digital security as we know it.
Between us, we have years of experience securing digital products and infrastructure, which has led us to be constantly curious about what's next.
Which is what this podcast is about, sharing our journey as we update our mental models for security in the next internet. Hello and welcome back to Not Your Crypto Podcast. Today we have a very interesting, the first of a two-parter series that we're planning on releasing over the next month or so. It's about crime on blockchain, and crime can't be facilitated without lack security, and so that's what got our interest in the first time. But first of all, I'll introduce my co-host, Michael. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing all right.
Yeah?
All right.
It's okay.
Yeah.
So basically, the crime we're talking about today is one that occurred over a year ago, but it was actioned in terms of the people who executed it were arrested at the time of recording 3 weeks ago now, maybe mid-May 2024. The headline here is very shocking, quite arresting. They stole $25 million within 12 seconds.
Did you say the headline was quite arresting?
Yeah, you like what I did there. They sold $25 million within 12 seconds. And we're going to go into how they did that. And more importantly, the security vulnerability that allowed them to do that. And then even further, we're going to delve into why it was even possible, how blockchain transactions are selected, built, and added to the blockchain, and what they saw in terms of the opportunity to exploit and be able to try and get away with this heist. Spoiler alert, they clearly didn't get away with it because it was viewed, but everyone saw the attack as it happened in borderline almost real time. And it was the vulnerability has been patched as well. The assailants were known to the people they tried to steal a lot of money from, obviously, and so they've been reported to the necessary authorities, and the authorities have intervened. One thing they did say in their indictment is that it's the first of its world crime, and it's a classically unique crime to the technology in which they're exploiting, which again is interesting to people like myself and Michael, and it hopefully will be interesting to you. So yeah, Michael, I'm going to quickly go to you with what happened, and then you can ask me certain random questions, or we can just go in and play the part of good cop, bad cop in terms of interrogating what happened here. So yeah, 25 mil stolen in 12 seconds. They basically stole money from what is known as a decentralized exchange, which is as opposed to a centralized exchange. Long story short, the best description of the difference between the two is one in which you hold your own private keys. Remember, blockchain wallets are basically your identity and your authentication mechanism, and they're basically private public keys pairs. You hold your own private keys when you are the custodian of your own wallet. Coinbase is a custodian of your wallet. They hold your private key, in which case you won't own your own wallet. So you have the same thing with exchanges. Coinbase is obviously a centralized exchange plus more, and then you have decentralized exchanges in which you are responsible for looking after your own keys. So they robbed a decentralized exchange. They set up fake companies and then set up fake validators in order to exploit this. Again, validators are basically the supporting infrastructure of a proof of stake network, delegated proof of stake network. That they were out of pocket $880K, so they needed to make this robbery big. So they almost spent $1 million trying to do this attack. The attack was reported within 6 hours of it actually happening, which is absolutely crazy in terms of the details, because again of the way blockchain is set up. When money is moving, it goes through wallets, it goes through exchanges. People can track that by the second, literally. They were approached initially, once people realized what they'd done and who they'd done it to, they were approached to give the money back. It was, look, if you give us the money back, no harm, no foul, everyone moves on with their life. They said no, and then decided and proceeded to try and launder the money and walk off into the sunset. And that's when law enforcement got involved, Department of Justice, and has arrested them. They were 2 MIT students. So yeah, obviously they come from a prestigious university. They know their way around a tech stack. Let's just say that like that. Those are the headlines, really and truly. It is a fascinating case because it was specifically facilitated by the fact that it was done on blockchain. I don't see how you do this in a Web 2.0 world in terms of stealing $25 million from any type of online exchange. But it's interesting, and those are the bits that are interesting to us. So, Michael, what do you think about this? What were your first thoughts when you heard about this? What are you thinking technically? Let's just start riffing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think, like there's a bunch of things that are interesting here. I think, if you think of it in terms of like dollars per second, right? Like the velocity of it is
Yeah.
very large.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I guess I don't have great comparables, but like I agree. It sounds like kind of thing you can only get in the new world, right?
Yeah.
In the new decentralized world.
I like your dollars per second because I'm pretty sure ransomware doesn't even stack up to that for dollars per second in
Yeah,
terms
I don't
of
know. Probably
velocity.
not, right?
No.
And then I think like the overall interest here is the way that the attack, like the way that the activity that these people were performing
Hmm.
interacted with the blockchain,
Hmm.
um, but particularly interacted with the edges of the
Hmm.
blockchain, right?
As per usual. Yeah.
Because the location of the events, in a way, aren't the blockchain. The
Hmm.
location of like the activity that was happening here is the world that exists kind of in front of the blockchain,
Yep.
which I think is maybe the first thing to
Yeah.
start digging into,
Yeah, I
right?
think it is because when this headline first came up in technical press, it was, oh my gosh, Ethereum's been hacked. Ethereum wasn't hacked in this. Like the Ethereum blockchain was not hacked, and you'll see this as we get into more of the details. As what Michael's hinting at is, if you were to say, okay, blockchain world, compare it to what your understanding of the technical infrastructure for Web 2.0 world, you have these different actors. You have nodes and you have validators, and they are basically the backbone of any blockchain. You don't have a distributed, decentralized network without nodes and validators. And these transactions are supposed to be written in a trustless system to the blockchain. So, in order for a transaction to end up on the blockchain that everybody can read from, hence why they got caught so quickly, because everyone has access to the history of record, um, you basically go through a process, and the process is this: a transaction gets written by a client or created by a client, and then it goes to a node, which is basically a server somewhere, again at the edge that Michael is talking about. That server then validates the transaction is proper and correct against a series of parameters, and then that transaction gets shared amongst other nodes, who then do another further validation, and then after that, those nodes have validated that the transaction is in the correct, is proper and correct again. It then gets forwarded onto a validator, who then does another set of cryptographic operations on it to make sure that it's a valid transaction, and onto the network, onto the blockchain, it gets written. That is the process. In there, you have T plus one because time's proceeding at that point. And that's where things start to get interesting. That's how it is theoretically. Practically, whole different story. And that's where our two assailants come in here. So just to give a bit of jargon, basically, when I said it goes to a node, this basically those transactions are in a waiting area. That waiting area is technically known as a mempool. So you have a local mempool, and then you have not quite a global mempool, but a distributed mempool amongst a series of nodes as well. And those mempools can be in different states because they get different transactions at different times. So that's basically a that's a quick overview of a flow of a transaction, how it gets written to the blockchain. I guess the next thing we can talk about here is basically what that led to, right? So that setup led to some node operators. And don't forget, in a delegated proof of stake blockchain, you get paid for actually participating and processing these transactions and writing them to the node. You get paid in these thing called gas fees. I don't think I'm trying to think up a parallel in Web 2.0 world where you get paid for participating. I guess in social media where they give you adverts, but you don't get paid. They make money off that. I don't even know. No, I don't think that works as a parallel. I don't think there's any parallel for participating in a Web 2.0. They just say you're the product, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, in this case, you can actually get paid for participating in the network and supporting the network, and that's through gas fees. So validators are incentivized to do processing. Not the problem, what people realized was information is power, and information can be turned into opportunity, and more importantly, monetary opportunity. Because if you have access to what transactions are waiting to be written to the blockchain, you, especially when you have assets associated with those transactions, you can start to basically trade against them. This is where I'm going to let Michael ask some of his questions or make some of his points from his point. But long story short, yes, the time delay means that somebody can get in there for specifically a node operator and see what's going to happen in the future, so to speak, and therefore maybe able to take advantage of that. What are you thinking around that, Michael?
Yeah. So like the abstract model of a blockchain is I as a client want to make a transaction. A bunch of other
Hmm.
clients want to make transactions as well. We send those transactions somewhere,
Hmm.
uh, and then they need to go from that somewhere to the chain, right? They need to get
Hmm.
written by something to the chain.
Yeah.
And in like a proof of stake, or at least the model, like the proof of stake model that we're talking about here,
Hmm.
um, that happens every like X amount of time, right?
Hmm.
There's
Yeah.
like a step forward in the global state
Yeah.
in a block being written every X amount of time, and a block contains a bundle of
Hmm.
transactions, right?
Yeah.
So, um, so something, uh, so something needs to hold on to my transaction
Hmm.
until it gets committed, and then I need to
Hmm.
take my transaction and a bunch of other transactions, uh, and put them in a sequence
Hmm.
inside of a block that then gets written,
Yeah.
right? So so there's like a lot of there's like time and space here
Hmm.
that is sequentially in front
Yeah.
of the chain,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and that's where this like ecosystem is developing.
Yeah, because there's one other factor that I almost forgot to mention here is, but I did kind of hint at it. Validators are incentivized through gas fees. Blocks don't have a fixed size. They have an upper limit, but they can have 10 transactions, they can have 20 transactions. The more processing you do, the more gas fees you charge, the more money you make. So from the default abstract, a node, or sorry, a validator can say, I'm going to pay, or I want to be paid this amount of gas fees for these amounts of transactions for a block size this big, or a block size with these transactions in them. So that's where the what's the word I'm looking for here? But that's where it gets interesting, basically, because they don't have to try and process them in order. Nowhere does it say a validator has to process them as they come. A validator is incentivized to process all the gas fees they want to make, basically, in all the transactions that will give them as much gas fees as possible. Sorry, did that interrupt your train of thought, or does that
Yeah,
add to it?
no,
Make sense?
exactly, because uh, like the incentive for doing this processing is the design of Ethereum is or the design of, I guess, this model of blockchain
Mm-hmm.
is the incentive for participating in it as the validator,
Mm-hmm.
uh, is the gas fees,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, like we were talking about before, like naively, you might expect a couple of things to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You would either expect the validators to pick off the highest fee
Mm-hmm.
transactions, and then do like highest to lowest fee in whatever amount of space that they have, and then have that
Mm-hmm.
as the block.
Yeah.
Or you might expect a validator to take like the first one that comes in, and then the second one, and the third one, and then the fourth one, and go sequentially like in time, and have
Yeah.
that as the set of transactions committed to the block.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's not what you see in practice.
No, because of the exact realization. And so then what happened was it was a case of they then decided some thinking was done within the community, and they were like, well, the major problem with this is validators, even though they're chosen at random, if a validator starts to amass other validate, a business can buy another business and start to amass more validators, they get access to a larger mempool. And same thing with nodes. If nodes all become under one legal entity, therefore, they will have more an unfair advantage in the market because they will then be able to pick off all of the, they call it MEV, maximal extractable value from a given block, i.e., which are the valid transactions that give me a heads up to what's going to happen in the future that I can trade against. Um, so basically, the larger a validator gets, the more transactions they get to choose from. Therefore, the bigger the advantage they get. And Ethereum proof of stake or delegated proof of stake, in theory, is all validators are equal under the sun. No one validator should have access or more power on the network than the other, because then it's not decentralized by definition. So they said, okay, so what do we need to do to make it so that just because this behavior we're not going to be able to stamp out, but we also need to defend against the idea of validators getting more access to more transactions. We need to make it fair for all participants who want to participate in this so-called market of mining blocks to have access, it's equal amounts of access to everybody. And hence, they came up with a concept of called MEV Boost. Maybe it's MEV Boost. I don't know. We don't talk to enough people in the community to know exactly how to say these things. Is it GIF or GIF? No. So basically, what we then they came up with MEV Boost, Maximum Extractable Value Boost. It was basically a technical implementation of a white paper that discussed proposer builder separation. A lot of jargon. Long story short, block proposers are basically your validators. And builders are people who build blocks. So what they said was these algorithms or these traders who were building these algorithms to go and search for these valuable transactions, they should be separated from validators. If you're going to participate in this market, validators can still build their own blocks, but just they won't be in this MEV market. If you're going to participate in this market, there should be a third party where these blocks are up for auction, and basically they will bid, or the validator bids, if I remember correctly, for a block, because they know for a certain amount of gas fees they can pre-configure their MEV boost configuration to say, I will pay X amount of gas for this block or whatever. In this market, you have three components. So you have the builder, which is basically is a bot. You have a relay, which is your market where the blocks go to. I.e., I've now built this block of transactions as a searcher or a trader, and it's now going to go to a relay. And everybody, all the validators that have opted into this system, can see that block at the exact same time. They then choose or do not choose to process that block for whatever reason. Maybe there's not enough money in it for them, etc., etc. If they do choose it, they then get access to the contents of that block, and the processing happens as per usual. If they don't choose it, then they should never see the contents of that block. That's the way it works. And so, again, back to your idea about, or your point earlier about being pushed to the edge, this all happens in a technical third party, which is the relay, which is basically another server that everybody subscribes to and looks at the updates and looks at the blocks, looks at the blocks that are there and sees which one they want to process. So that's kind of, so we've done how it flow. Just to recap, how a transaction goes to the blockchain, why it's not in order when you think it would be, just the first come, first serve, and in the context of a solution, historical context of how they developed a solution and this market around block building. That takes us up to, where are we right now in timing? It's like 18 minutes in. Okay, so this is just the history of what happened, of why we have the market we have, these concepts of MEV boost and maximum extractable value from blocks. Where it gets interesting is the security analysis. So these are all basically just servers running applications, running basically that you can query for whatever information. So the relays, as you can notice, they become a security boundary because they have access to information that the validators are not supposed to have access to at that point in time. They're supposed to only get access under a certain condition. So, Michael, this is where we start to talk about threat models and we get into our product security bag, where it's like, okay, so you have validators, you have nodes, fine. Then you have relays, and then you have builders. What is the threat model here? Because whatever the builder builds, we know the validator is not supposed to see it until a certain condition is met. Take it away.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so the market is like, one side of the market is constructing sequences of transactions that it thinks are valuable, or that are valuable to it. That's the builder side. It's building a sequence of transactions. And then it is offering, I want to say selling, but that sounds like the wrong word. It's offering a almost like a bounty for somebody to pick up that for the other side of the market, the validators, to pick up that sequence of transactions, and then and then use their ability as a validator to like get it onto the chain, right?
Yeah.
So like you can think of like the thing being sold on the market is in a way a sequencing of transactions within the mempool,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Um, so the security bound, like the kind of non-obvious security boundary is, or the kind of non-obvious security implication is that the thing being sold is information, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the thing being sold in a way
100%.
is data,
Yep.
in that it's a sequencing of transactions. Like everybody
Yep.
knows, I don't know, this may not be like 100% true in practicality, but in a theoretical sense, everybody has access to the kind of shared mempool space or the
Mm-hmm.
distributed mempool space,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of knows what transactions are out there.
Yep.
Um, so it's not like the transactions themselves; it's
Mm-hmm.
that the builders have a specific sequencing that's valuable to them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so if on the other side, if the builder on the the builder on the other side of the market knows that information without paying for it,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that's what breaks the security model.
Sorry, you mean the validator knows
So
that
yes, yeah,
information
yeah. Oh
without
my god,
paying
I
for it?
think I
Yeah.
confused that before
No, it's
too when we
fine.
were talking.
It's yeah, I've done it before. Yeah, if the
The
validator
validator.
has access or to that information, then there's no need for the builder. I can just build that block myself, mate, and take all the MEV and trade against it myself. So yes, the builder has an incentive to keep that information hidden from the validator. Hence why we have this third party, the relay, because that's where you go. It's like a market as a validator. Builders pay the gas fees that they basically that the validator is willing to wants to be paid. They basically say, look, for this block slot, because basically things are, as Michael said earlier at the beginning of this podcast, the blockchain is written in timed slots. So validators say, I want X amount of gas fees for this slot, and builders bid for that slot, knowing what they're going to do with the information once it goes onto the blockchain. So yeah, so if validators need access to that information and the builders withhold it, they put it in a relay. That way, it makes it fair for everyone who wants access to these blocks. That's the whole idea of this, introducing this third-party relay, separating block builders from block proposers. Relays can have vulnerabilities. It turns out. Who knew? And so basically, what happened and the reason why these guys were able to walk away with 25 million in 12 seconds is because they targeted a relay. They noticed there was a vulnerability in a relay in Christmas 2022. They then literally put a Google Doc together and said, "This is how we're going to exploit it." And then they basically, as I said, spun up fake businesses, validators, 16 validators, spent 880K USD in getting it all up. And then they targeted, knowing that this particular relay had a vulnerability, which meant, long story short, that a validator could get access to the block details without having to process or bid on that block or having to actually take that block and process it. They then dialed this up to 11 because what they then did was their exploit of this vulnerability was to induce other front running trading bots to basically tie up a lot of capital from a decentralized pool, a decentralized pool on an exchange, and then with access to those bot blocks, they then front ran those trades and basically got a lot of money, $25 million in various types of crypto assets, and effectively drained that pool basically within. And it all happened within one slot, which is a 12-second period, which is why the headline is 25 million in 25 seconds, in 12 seconds. I like to call this episode, I like to first this episode 25 sitting on 25 mil. But basically, yeah, that's basically what they did. It's a crazy exploit because there's a lot of thinking that went into it. Obviously, there's the vulnerability itself, but then there's everything that came around it, because the vulnerability itself wouldn't allow you to walk away with $25 million. It was inducing these greedy sandwich bots that are called sandwich bots because they front run and back run your transaction. They basically see your transaction going to move the market, buy up that asset, and then when the market moves, they sell that asset. So they get paid coming and going, basically. And they got these sandwich bots to basically jump in. They baited them in with a fake transaction. The sandwich bots then jumped in, tied up a huge amount of capital because of the way they had constructed their trade, which I won't bore you the details with, but tied up a huge amount of capital, $25 million worth, and then they front ran those trades. Um, it's a fascinating, it's a fascinating exploit because of obviously the numbers involved 25 million 12 seconds, but also because of the thinking around it in terms of, okay, here's a brand new system, there's a brand new market, here's a brand new technical implementation, which was a fascinating solution to an interesting problem. As in, I think, Michael, you once mentioned crypto libertarian solution in terms of, because the security professional in me says, okay, if everyone should have access to the same order of transactions, then we just enforce that. We don't then gamify the market. But gamifying the market, I mean, human nature being what it is, people try and find holes around that. So the idea to gamify the market and reward the behavior is an interesting way to go. I don't think my brain doesn't go there naturally. What about you, Michael?
Yeah, like there's a bunch of like the vulnerability operates on two levels to me.
Hmm.
Because there's the technical side of the vulnerability, which is like breaking the security boundary in
Hmm.
disclosing, like being able to disclose a sequence of transactions.
Yeah.
But then secondarily, there is a almost like you almost want to call it a social vulnerability or a socio-technical vulnerability in
Mm.
that you need these market dynamics happening within this like basically staging area to the blockchain, right?
Hmm.
So like both those things need to happen for the value extraction
Yeah.
to happen. Like you can't just
Yes.
know what the sequence of transactions is going to be.
Yeah.
You have to um, also inject some information
Hmm.
into the like dynamics that are going on in front of the blockchain
Hmm.
to get other participants in that marketplace
Hmm.
uh, to generate transactions
Yeah.
with large amounts of value.
Which is exactly, yeah, exactly. So I agree with you 100%. And so that's where for me, and the second part, sorry, I realized at the top of this podcast I didn't say what the second part. First part was going to be the technical analysis. Second part is going to be us doing our armchair philosophy and observation analysis on what we think happened here really and what this actually means, etc., etc. So stick around for that second part. um and that's when I first read about this, I was like, where's the crime? Because I was like, they just front runners. But then I think it's the second part that you're talking about, which is the socio. What was it? Did you call it socio-technical
That's my word. Yeah.
vulnerability of inducing people to make? Yeah, it's another. Yeah, we're gonna have a Michael dictionary soon. So basically, the socio-technical part of it is you induce people to take trades they would never have taken, and in a way that was quite obviously out beyond the bounds of the norm, which is why this whole attack got spotted anyway, which is, I think it was their bait transactions. So it was in the first stage of their exploit where people were like, what kind of trades are these? These don't make any sense. And then they just follow the rest. Um, so I think the crime comes from the fact that not the exploiting the vulnerability because they just basically got information when they shouldn't have, but actually it's the exploitation of inducing people to do things they wouldn't normally do and then basically draining those people. But again, there's still some gray area around there, I think. Need to take a look more in detail at the indictment. I mean, either way, they tried to set up money laundering entities, so you're going to prison for that. But yeah, it is a fascinating story. I would recommend anyone who wants to get into more details, they should go and look it up. It's yeah, basically Merv Boost. The whole story from beginning to end fascinates me in terms of what the problem was around ordering of transactions, the solutioning of creating a market to be like, okay, we need to keep this fair. We don't want validators to grow in size and be able to have access to more information than other validators. And then the actual identification of a vulnerability and the exploitation, which didn't take place in a standard security kill chain, like standard application security kill chain that Michael and I are so used to. This was a whole other thing. This was almost fine. This was definitely financial crime. Actually, I'd go as far as say this was. I don't know. Maybe my finance friends can tell me more, but this just sounds like financial crime, um, cleverly executed on a blockchain network. Any thoughts, Michael?
No. Are we wrapping? Is that a good place to end? I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap. Yeah, fair. I think we're here at
Yeah.
like 30-minute mark or there and thereabouts. Thank you for listening. Keep an eye out for the second episode in which we get to pontificate from our very, very high horses. And
Cool.
maybe we'll all learn something new in between time. Thank you.